Hi, my name is Sarah Rivard. I am one of the instructors here at UMA. And in this presentation, we're going to be exploring issues of identity and stress-related mental health as they relate to influences on human behavior. Behavior is influenced by factors that all people have in common, as well as by individual differences. All of us are alike in many ways. We all have basic physical needs for food, water, shelter, sleep, oxygen, and physical safety. We also share basic psychological needs, such as the need for acceptance, belonging, love, self-esteem, and opportunities to develop our talents and abilities. Most behavior can be understood as an individual's effort to meet one or more of these needs. However, individual and cultural differences cause us to meet these needs in diverse ways. Three major forces interact to create a specific individual: heredity, the developmental process, and the physical and social environment. Each person is uniquely shaped by developmental and environmental influences. These influences shape the formation of our identity and the level of stress that we experience. In this presentation, we'll be focusing on how developmental and environmental influences can shape the formation of our identity and can lead to higher levels of stress. This presentation is designed to help you meet the objective of analyzing ways in which human differences shape a person's behaviors, as well as their experiences of and perspectives on the world. Identity is the inner sense of who a person is. It's formed by the integration of experiences of the self. Ethnic identity is the part of one's identity that contributes to self-image as an ethnic community member. Ethnic identity is formed by personal experiences and external messages about ethnicity. Ethnic identity is the part of a person's identity that reflects the racial, religious, or cultural group to which the person belongs. Ethnic identity can be positive, negative, or ambivalent. Positive identification results in a person accepting and integrating ethnic-related experiences, having ethnic-related reactions be conscious, accepting their ethnic self, having positive group attachment, and retaining and celebrating ethnic ways and attitudes. Negative identification, on the other hand, rejects and disowns ethnic-related experiences. Ethnic-related reactions remain unconscious. Aspects of the ethnic self are rejected. A person may deny, avoid, or escape group membership. And a person may take on majority ways and attitudes. Finally, with ambivalent identification, a person would go between states of being positive and negative. They may also compartmentalize areas of ethnic content. It is probably most accurate to say that white ethnics, such as Irish, Italian, Jews, Armenians, and so forth, have assimilated into American society on all these dimensions. but only to the extent that they have been willing to give up their traditional ways and values. People of color, on the other hand, were never really considered part of the Great Melting Pot and have remained structurally separate. They have, however, acculturated in varying degrees to the dominant Northern European culture. Thus, in the United States, assimilation has always been a one-way process. Acculturation, again, is the taking on of cultural patterns of another group. In this case, dominant white culture. In relation to working with culturally diverse populations, acculturation has importance in two ways. The first is being able to assess the amount of acculturation in order to determine the form of helping that's most appropriate for culturally diverse clients. The second is acculturative stress, or the emotional strain that acculturation can create, is often felt when traditional ways are lost or compromised as a result of acculturation. Acculturative stress is most pronounced during and after immigration. Acculturative stress is most pronounced during periods of transition, especially during and after significant migrations, for example, to the United States, and the exposure and necessary adjustment to a new culture. There are 5 factors that make the transition either easier or more difficult. Those factors include the reasons for the migration and whether the original expectations and hopes were met, the availability of community and extended family support systems, the structure of the family and whether it was forced to assume a different form after migration, for example, moving from extended family to exclusively nuclear family, the degree to which the new culture is similar to the old. The greater the difference, the more substantial the stress. And finally, the family's general ability to be flexible and adaptive. When the stresses are severe, the support insufficient, and the family basically unhealthy, it is likely to try to compensate in one of 3 ways, each leading to further stresses and a compounding of existing problems. The family may isolate itself and remain separate from its new environment. It may become enmeshed and close its boundaries to the outside world. Rigidify its traditional ways and become overly dependent on its members. Or the family may become disengaged, wherein individual family members become isolated from one another as they reject previous family values and lifestyles. Especially problematic is the situation in which family members acculturate at very different rates. The most common and problematic consequence of acculturation is the breakdown of traditional culture and family norms. Group members may feel less attached to traditions and leave the community to avoid hatred and animosity often directed in the group. This may result in a greater risk of being the objects of prejudice without the ability of the community to protect the individual. Now it's time for a quick knowledge check. The inner sense of who a person is referred to as A, identity, B, assimilation, or C, acculturation. If you chose A, identity, congratulations, you are correct. Our second question: when 2 distinct cultures come together to create a unique third culture, it is referred to as A, acculturation, B, identity, or C, assimilation. If you chose C, assimilation, congratulations, you are correct. And our final knowledge check, fully taking on another culture, usually the mainstream, is referred to as A, acculturation, B, identity, or C, assimilation. If you chose A, acculturation, congratulations, you are correct. It's important to understand the role of stress on health and wellness when working with culturally diverse clients. Being without resources and the perpetual object of discrimination make life more stressful and in turn increase the risk of disease, instability, and breakdown. Certain internal and external factors either increase or decrease the experience of stress and, as a result, the risk of stress-related diseases. Externally, current economic conditions set the stage for whether race and social class-related experiences will be sources of greater or lesser stress. Internally, individual temperament, problem-solving skills, a sense of internal control, and self-esteem reduce the likelihood that an event or situation is experienced as stressful. Two other factors that influence the effects of stress are what the actual stressful event was and how well an individual is able to adapt and use coping skills. There are stress experiences that are so extreme that they not only deplete personal resources, but actually shut down an individual's basic psychic adaptation systems. Clinically, we call these traumas or traumatic events. Traumatic events overwhelm the ordinary systems of care that give people a sense of control, connection, and meaning. Unlike commonplace misfortunes, traumatic events generally involve threats to life or bodily integrity, or a close encounter with violence and death. Intense trauma, which has been diagnostically labeled post-traumatic stress disorder, involves a loss of basic safety, intense fear, helplessness, loss of control, and threat of annihilation. There are four major symptoms associated with post-traumatic stress disorder. Hyperarousal, in which the internal biology of the self-preservation goes on permanent alert. Intrusion, in which traumatized people relive the event as if it were reoccurring in the present. Constriction and numbing, which involves a psychic deadening or disassociation from reality. And disconnection, which involves a shattering of the self, its attachment to others, and the meaning of human experience. The source and type of trauma dictate its impact and magnitude. Trauma resulting from natural disasters such as floods and earthquakes tends to be less debilitating than that caused by other human beings. Acts of God, as we might call them, tend to be less personally destructive and easier to recover from psychologically than those carried out in an interpersonal context. One possible explanation is that trauma caused by human hands is experienced as more personal and purposeful, and as a result is more likely to destroy a victim's basic sense of attachment to others and safety in the world. Repeated and long-term abuse, as in the case of torture, captivity, and repeated child abuse, is generally more destructive and debilitating than single isolated incidents. It's also important to understand that although the trauma experienced happened in the past, it can be best understood as lived memory. The victim has been reliving it over and over again in great detail as if it's still happening. Some researchers suggest that social trauma can be passed on or transmitted intergenerationally within ethnic families. An individual growing up in such an environment internalizes the trauma of past generations and responds to present events and experiences in light of that traumatization. Historic trauma emphasizes the massive cumulative trauma that can occur across generations and reflects a broader range of social consequences and dysfunction than is referred to by the more limited and historical diagnosis of PTSD. One example is a study that shows that children of Jewish Holocaust survivors are more vulnerable than others to the development of PTSD, including a greater degree of cumulative lifetime stress. It is also important to understand that substance abuse and dependence often occur with trauma. Physical pain and the disruption of healthy bodily functioning are regular occurrences in trauma. The psychic pain is less easily or quickly controlled, and patients regularly self-medicate in order to reduce the ongoing emotional pain. Now I'd like to take a moment for a reflection. Seat yourself comfortably, close your eyes, take a few slow, deep breaths, and relax. Try to project yourself into the following situation. You wake up one morning, get out of bed, see yourself in the mirror, and discover that you are now a different race. Envision yourself as such. Now visualize your way through a typical day as a person of a different race. What happens and how are your reactions, as well as the reactions of those around you, different? What kinds of emotions and feelings are building up within you? How has the world changed for you? So to summarize our key points from today, developmental and environmental influences shape the formation of our identity and the level of stress that we experience. Acculturation can impact a person's identity and stress levels. And finally, traumatic stress can significantly impact a person's mental health. I'd like to thank you for joining me on this presentation, and I wish you luck in all of your future learning endeavors.